There's a group that I just love. We started 23 years ago,
Wow.
and at the time, I think I was going to parties. I had young kids, when I'd see you at a party and be like, hey man, what's going on? You'd be like, yeah, how about those horns? I wanted a community of people I could ask real questions like, how do you deal with the fact that your kid's up at 3 a.m. and you haven't slept and you feel like throwing them, across the room or whatever. And I didn't have that. Let's create this thing called the men's group is what we call it. And the idea was, it was like book club without a book. We would just get together once a month, but the idea was to be able to talk about real things. It was a confidential space that we created. We had some rules around, how we talked to each other and how we worked with each other. But all the topics were open, anything, we could talk about anything. We talk about sex, how we deal with aging parents, death. So that group still gets together on a monthly basis. We have dinners 1 month where it's a little more casual, and then we have house meetings. And we'll meet from Friday afternoons from 1 to 5. And there's somebody who kind of facilitates or organizes what we're going to talk about. 15 years ago, we started having a retreat every January. So we get together for Thursday night to Sunday or Saturday noon. And we design kind of a retreat where everybody's responsible for bringing something. The group has morphed and changed. We've had people move. We had a gentleman pass away, one of our core people, which we miss dearly. But we've integrated new people, and it's not a huge group. I think it's gone from 5 to 10 maybe.
Austin Community Capital. This show is a celebration of the spirit of Austin, Texas, honoring our past, engaging our present, and building our future together.
Although it's not the last time.
Keith, so great to have you on the show this morning. You were introduced to me by my girlfriend who attended one of your events, and the way she introduced you was a thoughtful and intentional leader to the leaders and a community builder to the leaders. So really grateful to have you this morning.
Yeah, I'm super happy to be here. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Something, as I understand it, that was very formative for you was the environment you grew up in Houston, I believe. And, from what you shared to me, it sounded almost like something from the Wonder Years, this idyllic childhood like that we see in Hollywood or in the movies. So tell us about what upbringing looked like.
Yeah, it was an idyllic childhood for sure. I have, my parents are still married, still together. They're 89, 88 years old now. I have 2 older brothers. We had a very close-knit family and grew up in Houston. We were, I would say, there's a Jewish community there that was pretty tight as well. I mean, pretty strong. So grew up in this just tight knit, had great friends. The kids that went to Coulter Elementary School with me were still friends. I'll go see one of them this weekend in Houston. It was amazing. My grandparents were a big part of our family. My cousins were a part of our family. And so it was just a lot of love, a lot of good food, and a lot of laughter that I grew up with.
That's incredible. When you called out your grandparents, what shaping force did they have? How were they kind of leading and setting the tone for community? What were they up to, and what brought them to Houston maybe?
Yeah, I think my grandmother was from Houston, I'm pretty sure. And my grandfather was an immigrant. He came over early 1900s on a boat, came over from what I think is at the time was Poland, and now it is Belarus. And his entire family came over except for one brother. So his parents and all of his siblings came over, and he was a pretty young kid. But he is he was one of the drivers. They were strong, both matriarchs and patriarchs, I would say. My grandfather kind of quietly entrepreneurial, started his own grocery store with a buddy. And that grew and grew and grew until, my dad was part of that. My uncle was part of that. There were 20 plus stores in the Houston area. And so he was very entrepreneurial and did the growth of that grocery store. But it was also like a local grocery store. Like you knew the people who you went to, the Lewis and Coker in your neighborhood. You knew the butcher, you knew the guy in produce, you knew the manager or somebody who was checking you out. And on my grandmother, she was just a really strong personality. She had opinions. She was known to every once in a while bang her fist on the dining room table, if needed. But so the family was just, my grandparents kind of built community, because that's how you built a grocery store, right? Was just get to know who's in your community and serve them well. And so they started with kind of knowing the communities with the first grocery store, and then just expanding from there.
Oh, man, I love that. And every time I hear about a story of a family business like that, where many family members are involved, it sounds incredible. And I just think of all the expressions of that and all the ways that that is touching every part of the lives of those family members and is so ingrained in the culture of the family. Give us some vignettes of maybe you as a young guy. What did that look like for you? Were you spending time in the grocery store, helping out?
Yeah, there were lots of little, as a little kid, when you would go with your mom wherever she was going, even before you had to go to school or after school, so I'm tagging along, I'm pushing the cart, but seeing my mom or my grandmother stop and actually talk to, the butcher, because it was a personal relationship. These people were, in a way, like a little bit like our family, an extension of our family, because they worked in the family business. So that's how I watched my grandmother, my uncle, my dad, my mom treat them. So walking around the store and, my mom saying hi to the guy in produce and asking him what's fresh, but also saying, how's your family? And those types of things were really nice. I think when I was a teenager, I probably got carted over to the corporate office because there was work to do. We had to sort the coupons that had all come in. I mean, this is, pre-computers almost. I guess there were some computers, but, we were dealing with paper coupons. So I remember doing that in middle school. And in high school, I went to work at the store. I think I started off a little bit of stockroom work, but then kind of moved into being a cashier. I have a very vivid memory of, this is back in the days where you push the buttons. You didn't swipe the barcode on your product. You had to actually look at it, and it said $1.29, and you would go $1.29.
That'd be quick.
Yeah, you'd have to be quick. And my uncle comes through my line, of course, because my uncle wants to make sure I'm doing everything right. And so I say hi to him, and he says hi, and I start, look, and I punch in $1.29, and I take the next one, and I get through maybe 2 items, and he looks at me and he goes, I'm sorry, what'd you say? And I said, I didn't say anything. He said, oh, I thought you were calling out the prices as you were punching them in. And I was like, oh, 243, 179, because that was how you did customer service, right? You wanted to make sure your customer knew that you were putting in the right things and that they were paying the right amount.
He was training you.
He was training me in that moment. And I never forgot that about customer service, but, and he had a good sense of humor. So it was a fun way to do it.
I love that. And I love just the example that your mom and your grandma said of, hey, talk to your butcher in the grocery store. And I think that's accessible to anyone, not just the owners of the grocery store, but that's a way that I saw my dad relating growing up of, we grew up in a small town in California, and he would know people at, the restaurant we go to or the grocery store or the dry cleaner, and seeing him relate to those folks and then seeing how they felt seen and felt connected with, I was like, man, this is the type of community I want. So that's, a constant goal for my life here in Austin. I love that you got powerful examples of that early on.
Yeah.
And tell me, Keith, so it sounds like your grandparents were a force in the community. What were some family rhythms that maybe, they started, or traditions that were really formative in your family community?
Yeah, we of course, growing up Jewish, we did have, it was interesting. My grandparents and my parents, when my grandparents came to America, my grandfather, the big thing was to assimilate, right? To become part of the community. So I think that's part of why my grandfather was good at that. But also being Jewish, if you imagine being Jewish growing up in the 20s and 30s and 40s, you didn't always put it out there. You kind of kept it here inside. And so my grandparents and my parents had a Christmas tree when I was growing up. And we came home, me and my brothers came home once from Sunday school, Jewish Sunday school. And we were like, why do we have a Christmas tree? And my parents were like, they didn't have a good answer. And that was kind of the end of our Christmas tree. So we did celebrate the Jewish holidays, And there are some big family holidays, Passover, you get together, there's a lot of food. But I think the biggest cultural influence that my grandparents started, and I was talking to my dad about this morning because I asked him when this started, is a thing called Sunday night dinners. So my dad said that at some point, I think there was a neighbor of theirs, a guy named Mr. Lee, that opened up a Chinese restaurant, and my grandparents knew him well. And so we would go to Lee's Den. That was the name of the restaurant over on Main Street in Houston. But that started before my dad got married. So every Sunday night, they'd go to Lee's Den. You know, they get the pressed chicken. My grandfather would eat the egg rolls with the hot mustard sauce on it. And that just was a tradition. As my dad grew up, you know, once he got married, and him and his brother and their spouses would go to Sunday night dinner, go to Lee's Den. And that tradition just continued. At some point, it kind of morphed between going to actually Lee's Den, which I did as a kid, but also to sometimes maybe we'd pick up the Chinese food and sit at my grandparents' house. And then eventually, you know, at my parents' house. When my grandparents passed, the tradition continued. It continues to this day. So when I go to Houston on the weekend, you know, I'll go for an event on Saturday night, but I'll probably stay Sunday because it's fun to stay for Sunday night dinner because whoever's in town, whoever the family's got, they come and we just get together, and it's just a way to connect with everyone and what's going on. And just one fun addendum to that is, at a certain point, I don't think this is happening as much now, but my dad is very much involved in the community in Houston as well. And he would just meet people through his connections, I think, and then he'd bring those people to Sunday night dinner just to have us have a different experience, to meet someone. There were baseball players, pitchers from the Astros were at our house for dinner sometimes.
That's friggin' awesome.
It's pretty crazy. Surgeons from the medical center would come and talk about what's going on in technology. I mean, so there were some really interesting people that every once in a while joined, and then friends of the family would come every so often. And, you know, we still, every once in a while, somebody will say, hey, you know, when can I come back to a Sunday night dinner? I haven't been to one in a while. So it's really it's a nice thing. And it's just a way to reconnect with the family and the extended family as well.
And that's powerful. And I'm sure that anyone who attended, even if it's, you know, a celebrity baseball player, I'm sure it was super memorable for them. There's something about stepping into an existing tradition, and particularly like joining in with a family where there's a lot of just rich, deep relationships. As an outsider, you feel part of the crew, and there's an amazing aura about it that I think is really powerful and just speaks volumes. And I love there's an encouragement to, I think, folks who are tuning into this episode in that dinner of, hey, the barrier is low to start a really rich, powerful tradition. Maybe pick a night of the week and get your immediate family together, and maybe that will become a convening point for extended family when they're in town, or if they live locally, or friends passing through, or an interesting person in your orbit. I just love that the richness of that compounds over time, and it's still, you know, living today. That's incredible.
Yeah, I think, you know, we do that a little bit with our, we live in a cul-de-sac. So there's, you know, 7 or 8 houses, and some of the people are a little quieter or, you know, not as social, but the, 5 families that are fairly social, you know, we every once in a while would do a Sunday night dinner with just the neighborhood. I mean, you just pick up the phone or send the text and say, hey, we're ordering Chinese in by 3:00 on Sunday. Tell us what you want, and then show up at 6 and we'll hang out together. And, you know, it's not onerous. The food shows up. You might have to clean some dishes at the end, but you bring everyone together. And it's been, it's another wonderful thing to do that just with your neighborhood, right? I think we're a bit isolated now. It feels like that people move into neighborhoods and, you know, they don't talk to their neighbors. They don't meet them. Or you move into an apartment building and you don't just find out who are the people on either side of you and above and below you. Because the value of doing that, though, is huge, right? It's huge. So now not only do we have friends in our neighborhood, like good friends that we hang out with, that we play golf with, that we vacation with, but we also have people that we can go, hey, we're out of town. Can you take our garbage cans back in? Or, hey, there's a guy, you know, we're not there. You have a key to our house. Can you let this guy in to do X, Y, or Z? I mean, we have this amazing support system now. And the stories I could tell you about some of the neighbors and the things that they did, we've had neighbors that when my wife was sick and my daughter, when she was a baby, was sick, one of the neighbors came over. He was helping me get us so we could go to the hospital. And he held my daughter. My daughter threw up all over his back. And he was like, oh, here you go. And I was like, I'm so sorry. And my wife came out and she threw up on his shoes. And it was just like, but the guy was wonderful. He was lovely about it. He had kids. He understood what was going on. And he was super helpful. He went home, cleaned his clothes, took a shower, and was ready to go the next day for us if we needed.
Man, that's incredible. And I think there's a misconception and maybe an irrational fear that people have that reaching out to their neighbors would be a bother. And quite the opposite is true. And I think like you're proof of that. There's such richness in connecting with the folks around you. And it's amazing, the enjoyment that comes from those relationships, but also help in a time of need.
This show is supported by Loyal Home Concierge. You can take a company public, but you just found a scorpion in the guest room. Welcome to Austin. We'll handle it. LoyalHomeConcierge.com.
So I think that's incredible that those 7 homes are so close. Any traditions in that neighborhood or fun experiences or ways that y'all connect outside of the occasional dinner?
Yeah, we connect on a lot of things. Halloween's coming up. We always kind of are outside. Instead of everybody being in their homes waiting for the trick-or-treaters, we just kind of we put a table in the middle of the cul-de-sac, put all the candy there. And when the trick-or-treaters come into the cul-de-sac, we're like, hey, everybody's here. Just,
Central point.
You don't have to go to all the houses. So that's one of those times. And then another time my wife and I, my wife grew up Air Force is what she would call it. Born in Oklahoma, moved around quite a bit. And at a certain point early in our marriage, she said, I want to make sure our kids get some different experiences. So in 2007, we picked up our 3 kids and we moved to San Miguel de Allende in Mexico.
Oh, beautiful spot.
So it's a beautiful spot. It's a different culture. They speak a different language. It's a little cheating because there's a lot of expats there. But that's where we chose because my wife was like, we need to give our kids that experience. Well, before we left for that trip, we threw a party to kind of empty out our house. We rented our house out. So we threw a party and put out a bunch of stuff and said, you have to leave here with something, take stuff. And we had a taco truck come by and serve tacos. When we got back, we decided, that was kind of a fun party. Let's have a party again. And so we had a Cinco de Mayo party, I think is what it started off as. And then it morphed into kind of a fiesta. So every year we'd hire the same taco truck guy. He's now part of our family because, we work with Rogelio every year to bring in tacos and rice and beans and guac and everything. And he knows us. He invited us to his kids' quinceañera when that occurred. And what we did was as the party kind of grew a little bit, at one point, my wife and I looked at each other and we said, why don't we see if the neighbors want to be part of this and make it a block party? They come to our party, but why don't we see if we want to expand the party and just make it a bigger, huge block party, not just our party, but the cul-de-sacs party. And, the first year we did that, the neighbors kind of dipped their toe in and they invited like 6 people, 7 people, 10 people, and everybody had a great time. And they were like, oh man, we're going all in. And so, there were a few years before COVID, we had about 150 people show up, eating tacos, sitting under tents, just having a great time. People would bring tequila. We had the margarita machines going. We'd make sure people got home safely and gave them an Uber if they needed or whatever it might be. And so we still have that party going on. Even what's really funny is now we've had 2 of those neighbors have moved. One moved up north or farther north in Austin, up by Buda or somewhere there, Georgetown. And then another neighbor got a job in Arizona and he's now in Arizona. He's going to move back at some point. But those 2 new families that have moved in, we've introduced themselves. We said, hey, here's the deal. There's a party we throw every April. It's
join up, join the ranks.
Here are your choices. You can be part of it. You can throw it with us. You can test it out and see how it goes. We're not forcing you to spend money to throw a party with us, but you're invited to the party. If you want to invite friends, here's how that works. And the first year was last year this year, and they joined in. They had some friends come. It was an amazing party. It lasted, I think it ended at 1 a.m. this past year, and just a ton of fun. And so now we've inculcated a bit these new families that have joined us, and it's just super fun. And they love it too, right? One of them's got a new baby, so now they've got babysitters all over the cul-de-sac if they need.
Man, I love that. I know where I want to be on Cinco de Mayo. I'm going to see if I can, work an invite to that.
I'll let you guys know. We moved that into April because it gets so hot now.
Oh yeah, being outside.
So we've moved it into April and call it Fiesta now. But yeah, we'll put you guys on the list. Y'all are welcome to come.
All right,
stop
I'd
by.
be honored.
Yeah.
Well, and something on that I didn't know is like there's a process here in Austin to cordon off a street with the city and have a block party. And so I would love to drive around on a Saturday and see a number of neighborhood streets closed off because neighbors are partying with each other. That would bring my heart a lot of joy. And so I love that y'all are setting a good example there.
Yeah. I don't know how it is on this side of town. I mean, I love the side of town that y'all are on, the east side. But I don't know if you noticed this on Saturdays. I mean, obviously Austin's a big football town. We drive through our neighborhood on a Saturday and you'll see cars, packed into certain houses, and there's a big UT football watch party going on. And I do love to see that. My wife and I will sometimes joke, we'll drive and we'll be like, why didn't we get invited?
Be like, let's pop into this one,
see who's lives there, and we'll meet some new people. But yeah, it's a pretty nice neighborhood where we are.
That's awesome. So you dropped casually this San Miguel de Allende adventure. How did that come about? And what was that? I mean, that's such a unique experience for a family.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was really, I give all the credit to my wife because she was the one, like I said, she grew up Air Force. So she said, I think we were living in our first house here in Austin, maybe had our first child. And my wife had gone to the grocery store and she came home and she said, "Hey, I saw someone I knew at the grocery store." And I was like, "Oh, that's awesome." And she goes, "Yep, time to move." And I was like, "Wait, what?" So, I grew up in Houston with this deep rooted family in Houston, Texas. And she's like, "No, we need to pick up the roots and move around and get some different experiences." And so that was, so let's say that was 96, 97, maybe when that happened. And throughout the next 10 years, she just kept talking to me about, hey, at some point we should take the kids somewhere else. And, I was a big like, no, we need to be grounded and with our roots here. And she was like, no, we need to move around. And then we had really good friends of ours move to San Miguel and they took their kids there. And both of them kind of were able to work remotely. And their kids, I think they stayed 3 years. And we went and visited them a couple of times during that time that they were down there and took our kids down and just had a great time. We were there for a week or 10 days. And then at some point, my wife said, we should just go to San Miguel. And our friends ended up heading back to Toronto where they lived. And we rented the house that they had and moved down to San Miguel. My wife was a banker and she is a banker and she quit her job. They didn't want her to work remote. So she was like, okay, well, I'm just going to take a year off, retire early or test out retirement. And I kind of, downshifted my business a little bit so that I could enjoy the time down there and put the kids in school. They went to a great school, the bilingual school. And I would say it's probably one of the best adventures our family's been on. We just loved it. And again, you talk about community and culture. San Miguel clearly has a very strong culture just of being a colonial Mexican town. But the community that is there is amazing. I mean, you make friends like that. I mean, people are like, "Hey, nice to meet you. We're having a party Saturday night. Why don't you come by?" You sit in the town square and you just sit there on the benches and you meet people and you build relationships based on whatever it might be. You like to play golf. You like art. You take a jewelry class. You are from Austin, Texas, whatever it might be. And you meet people and you just become friends. And it's a phenomenal culture that they have there.
Man, that's so cool. Well, I can vouch for the cool culture. San Miguel is amazing.
Yeah.
And what just an enriching experience for your family and for your kids. And so unique. I mean, such a privilege to be able to do that. My grandfather was Air Force, and so he was stationed in Spain for a period of time. And so my mom, during some younger years in her childhood, her and her sisters grew up in Spain. And so I see now how that experience deeply enriched her life and gave her a cultural appreciation for other cultures, a curiosity and openness. It was really shaping for her. And I'm sure that, there's so many positives for your kids.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I think they look back on it very fondly. My youngest, who was, I think, 5 when we moved there, he says, I don't remember a ton. He claims not to remember, but there are certain things I know he does remember, playing soccer down there when he was 5 and 6 years old. But, they would put teams together and you'd have 5-year-olds with 9-year-olds and stuff. I mean, it was a little insane, but it was a lot of fun. And I think they do look upon it fondly. My daughter started riding horses when she was down there and just fell in love with a particular horse. Fantasma was the name of that horse. And when she came back to Austin, she continued to ride for a number of years. So, I mean, lots of little impacts that you don't notice until you kind of see other things blossom. And even now, if you come to my house, as my wife is kind of doing the Halloween decorations, you'll see lots of, the sugar skulls that they have for Day of the Dead, for Dia de los Muertos. So we don't have a lot of sugar skulls themselves, but you'll see like wine bottles with the painting of the sugar skull on it. And there are different things around our house that have that influence of our time down in San Miguel.
Love that little nod of that culture. And so you mentioned the career changes that had to happen for that trip to be possible. And I think that's a great segue into a little on your career journey and how you got to where you are now as, a leader to the leaders. So I was covering in my intro. So talk about where you got started and let's walk through that career journey and how you were being shaped as a leader and growing and what you were seeing in these different communities you got to be a part of professionally.
Yeah, there were so many little bitty things that I feel like I picked up, and I'm not sure if I can even name them all, but I mentioned when I was a kid and working in the grocery store and just the influence of my dad and my uncle and my grandfather, and just that community that they built within the organization and how they treated customers. That was a huge piece of it. When I went to college, I went to Northwestern University, and I wanted to get involved somehow. In the first or second week I was there, in the daily Northwestern newspaper was an advertisement to try out for Willie the Wildcat, the mascot. So I was like, well, let me just go give that a shot. And I got that job. And part of the reason I got that job is Northwestern was the worst football team in the country at that time. We had lost 20 some odd games in a row. We did not win a game my entire freshman year. We set the record for the most losses in a row.
They needed the spirit of a good mascot. There was a big gap to be filled.
So there was lots of learnings, though, that occurred during my mascot years about, cheering people on and bringing enthusiasm, and also just how you represent an organization. We had fun in college, but we got in trouble a couple of times, me with the other cheerleaders, and we had some interesting things, but you learned about, hey, you can't do that stuff. Like, you guys are wearing Northwestern on your chest, or you're dressed up as something that represents the organization. And that was a great lesson in leadership and understanding that, if you're the leader of an organization, you are that representation. That's what people look at. So there were some great lessons that came out of that. I went to work for Leo Burnett out of college, and Leo Burnett was a fabulous company. That it was an advertising agency, but I was in media buying and planning, which are the people that secure advertising time with ESPN or different networks, et cetera. And my client was McDonald's. So a lot of good exposure there, but that organization was a work hard, play hard kind of place. It was just super fun. We would work hard, but then we would go play. And Leo Burnett's really well known in the Chicago area as well. We'd have a team day. We'd take, 1,000 or some odd people from the office over to the hotel. They would have this huge breakfast, and they'd show us all the advertisements that we had made or were going to be making that next year. They would decorate it. So Keebler was one of our clients. So I remember one year the entire room was decorated like the Keebler tree, the elf tree, where all the elves.
Oh yeah, I remember the
I mean, it
Cuba
was
Elf tree.
huge. It was, and there were 3 screens in the tree's trunk. That was where they showed the advertisements and where everybody was broadcast. But the tree went all the way across the ceiling, and then we would leave there. We went to Wrigley Field, and someone from Leo Burnett sang the national anthem, and we were recognized as it was Leo Burnett Day. So it was just an amazing culture there as well, in a community that they built. And we had just a ton of fun. Even our little media buying and planning group, who all worked for Sally Hunter, she was our director, maybe 25 people in that group. We were just a fun community, people that laughed together. And, I think one year we created we called it the Men of the Hunter Group calendar. So because it was mostly women who were in that group, but there were about 7 guys. So what we did was we went into Sally's office when she was not there on a Friday afternoon, and we all kind of took our shirts off and did poses and took pictures, and then we presented it to all the women in the group. Said, "Here's your Men of the Hunter Group calendar." It's just a big gas. So
That is hilarious.
like that.
Okay, the stonemason sent a PDF. The plumber wants a check. Wait, who is Dave on Venmo? Is that the woodworker or the tool rental? Oh my gosh. Stop playing forensic accountant with your own renovation. With Loyal, you get one consolidated invoice. We manage the vendors and the paperwork. One bill, 0 confusion. Loyal Home Concierge.
So that was a big influence. I went back to grad school at UT, got my MBA. I went to work for Accenture. Back then it was called Anderson Consulting. And I was in the change management group and worked in Texas for clients, but also in Prague for a client that we got there right after the curtain came down. So again, just amazing to see the culture, this kind of socialist culture that existed in Prague, and all the things we had to do to help them privatize their banking industry, is who our client was. So great lessons there in change management and how we deal with change. And then went to work for Eagles Flight, a Canadian-based company that does a lot of experiential learning. So I started facilitating and training people, but then also learned about teamwork and more about leadership, and ran my own, moved into sales, ran a sales team, became a VP of business development, and was doing, a bit of everything and trying to lead a team and grow a business and all these wonderful things that we did. And that was an amazing little family as well. Eagles Flight did an amazing job of just making you feel like a part of a family, a part of a community. They had team days. They had, we'd go up to Toronto or Guelph, Ontario, and celebrate Christmas all together. And there were people would read poems and sing songs that they created, for this event. And it was it was a great family, and learned so much from those people, not only about business, but about how to be a dad, or how to be a husband. And then in 2001, decided I wanted to integrate coaching into my practice, and Eagles Flight wasn't at the time interested in coaching. And so I just decided it was time to hang my shingle. And so I've had this business for 24 years, and just integrate a little bit of coaching and helping leaders become more effective. Still do a little bit of facilitating as well, and starting to do some speaking based on the book that I just put out. And I'm just having a great time with it, and being able to interact with people who are leading organizations, or maybe just leading a small team of operations people, and just trying to be a better manager or a better director.
That's such a vibrant career journey. And I love kind of sprinkled throughout these experiences you had of how connective, fun, and these creative expressions can be with your fellow employees. And I think that's a great reminder to our other leaders out there of, hey, deep relationships, close bonds make a much more valuable and well-functioning company. And, it's worthwhile to take time to have a little fun together, and to do that creatively, and unlock people to take initiative to write songs for the holiday party, or, be part of these different expressions so that they really, feel like they're invested.
Yeah. I think one of the great memories I have from Eagles Flight and it's my memory, but I know it's in the memory of other people because they still mention it to me when I see these people at Eagles Flight. I think it was one team day or something was happening in the business where we were at a tipping point and we could, we had done some really good things, but now we could really grow. And I remember that someone said, Keith, do you want to talk about something? Because I had one of the bigger sales that year. And so I brought Dr. Seuss's Oh, the Places You'll Go book. And I just read Oh, the Places You'll Go to the team. And, did it with some fun and enthusiasm, like a dad would read it to their kid. And everyone just loved it, because the messages in that book are fabulous. And everybody just, they were like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. And just to have the freedom, right, to come up with something and just whether you borrow it or steal it from someone else or you create it yourself, I think it was just a great opportunity to be able to share those kinds of things.
I love that. And so you brought us to where you are now as a coach, and you've written this book. And, what I know of you is you're very thoughtful and purposeful guy and intentional. What are some things that you want leaders to know, whether it's those you're working with or people reading the book? Like, what are anchor principles or tenets that are really powerful for you, for leaders out there?
Yeah, I think the book has, 10 chapters. It's a book it's called Sparking Your Inner Leader. And the idea came, about 20 some odd years ago, where I kept going back to my experience as a mascot at Northwestern, but also, I went on to be the Chicago Bulls mascot for 2 seasons as well. And, I kept going back to that when I was coaching leaders around their effectiveness and saying, it's not a perfect analogy. It's not 100%, but there are definitely some things I learned as a mascot that I see that leaders could really benefit from. So I just thought there would be a fun book that would allow people to, come back to the leadership conversation. We just need to constantly remind ourselves of what it really means to be a good leader and what are the techniques and the skills and the things that make great, effective leaders. So part of it was just a book to bring people back to the conversation about, hey, you represent the organization. Hey, giving and receiving feedback is super important. Hey, you have lots of resources around you that you could take advantage of that are free in many cases. Start looking around and seeing what you can use. So all of those kinds of messages were super important for me to just put in the book. And I had the mascot hook to just make it fun. So now when I show up for a talk or a workshop, I'll actually have foam mascots, heads of eagles and koala bears and unicorns, and we'll have some fun with it, right? We'll put the heads on, etc. But the main message, I think, to come back to the initial question is chapter 2 is about, it's about working from the inside out. That's not a new concept in leadership development. There are books called, Leading from the Inside Out or Inside Out Leadership. But I think I take it to a place that not many people do. So again, from the mascot perspective, if I had a Wildcat mascot uniform here, if we laid it on the ground, it doesn't do anything. It only becomes something when I get inside and create the character of that mascot, of that Wildcat. And I feel like I've learned that effective leaders do the same thing. They essentially wake up and they decide who they want to be that day. And they decide that on the inside and they bring that to the outside. So a lot of people do core value work, which would be, what are your core values? What do you hold dear? And that's wonderful work. And I have my clients do that work. But when we get to the point where they have their list and it says family, God, or spirituality, integrity, success, whatever those words are, what I realized was if you, Austin, had family as a core value and I had it as a core value, and I started to dig in and say, what does that mean to you? Your answer is going to be very different from mine and very different from theirs and very different from theirs. So I felt like family wasn't good enough. It wasn't detailed enough. So, when the Temple of Apollo over in Greece, I haven't been there yet, but it says, know thyself, right? The ancient Greeks kind of knew about that we really need to know thyself. But I want to go over there and I'm going to tap in underneath it in detail. Know thyself in detail. So I take people from this core value work and I say, let's write out what family means to you. And I have some guidelines around how to write it. So keep it in the present tense, keep it positive, those types of things. But now you might write something like, I am a caring son, brother, whatever it might be. You'd write out yours. And I might write out, I am a firm, fair, and consistent father who brings laughter to every interaction, right? So both of those are family oriented, but yours is going to mean something to you and mine's going to mean something to me. And it's also something that it's detailed enough that when I read it, it inspires me. It reminds me who I want to be and how I want to show up. And it just starts to, if I can practice it over and over and over again, it becomes who I am. Right? So I think the unique part of the book really is, and I would tell every leader this, is don't be satisfied. I mean, first of all, create at least some core values, but even that, be more detailed, be more specific about what does that mean to you? And what does that mean you're going to do today? How are you going to show up today and be who you say you want to be? And maybe you're already doing it, but I think some people also write things that they aspire to be, like a little bit of a reach, which allows us to grow and to be better and to think about, how do I want to talk to Austin today? Versus, I got 16 things to do and I got to, this is hopefully is going to be over at 10:30 and then I got to go do that and I got to go do that and I got to go do that. It's like, no, wait a second, Keith, you're going to spend this time here. How do you want to show up?
That's powerful. And I love, Keith, that you just casually dropped that you were a mascot for the Bulls for a couple of years. I mean, no big deal.
Yeah.
But what I want to come back to with what you shared is I think as a leader, it's easy to buy into this illusion of I just have to be reactive. And that's just the way I have to be because things are moving at a frenetic pace and I need to keep up and I just have to react. But wait a minute. Like, I love that question you articulated of how do you want to show up? Who do you want to be? And the work of determining that is these guiding principles. And I think it's so powerful that you're encouraging folks to use an I am statement because identity changes everything. And so if people are thoughtful about their identity, they're showing up how they want to show up and then communities are impacted. So I think that's so powerful.
Yeah. And what you're hitting on, Austin, is something that's very normal and human. So I could dive into all kinds of adult development theory that I know just enough to be dangerous. But most of us, we are guided by our brains, which are really designed to keep us safe. So the whole reactive piece, that's why we react, is because we see things and our brains kind of go, I mean, of course, it's not a saber-toothed tiger anymore, but it's like, oh, if I don't do that, I might fail, right? So there's a fear that comes up. And so the way to handle fear is to react to it and to do something that will quell the fear and put it down and make that threat go away. And that's how a lot of us as humans, we develop to do that. And that's a normal thing. It's not a bad thing. It's normal. Every human being on the planet does that. The next level of adult development, if you believe the theories, is what if I just said, I don't have to just react to everything, but what if I ask the question, what do I want to create? What do I want to have happen here, right? Who do I want to be? Thinking about working from a vision of how I want the world to be and how I want to impact that or how I want to be in that world is the next level. And that's the question that I help people answer through guiding principles. Show me what you want to create through who you're going to be. And when you do that, the whole reactive thing kind of goes away because now you're working towards something you want. And you start making different decisions. You go, you know what? I don't need to be at that meeting. I can send my direct report to that meeting now. Or, Other decisions about just, you know what, I can close up work right now because I'm going to go spend time with my good friend whose mom is sick, or, you know, who's going through a tough time. And I can be okay with that. And, you know, whereas in the past I might be like, the project's due. I'm going to have to work until 11 o'clock tonight. Well, you might, but you can also just say, you know what, I got to see what my priorities are. And let me go spend an hour with my friend and just talk to them and listen to them. And that conversation is going to add so much value to your life and their life, but also may add value to the project you're working on. You might go, wow, you know, what are the real priorities in life, and what are we really trying to do with this project? And it may ask you different questions, and you may have better solutions.
The work that you're talking about is, you know, personal transformation. It's incredibly powerful, and I think it's easy for that to feel daunting to folks of, wow, that's such a big thing of, I'm changing, I'm showing up different. How would you give people some maybe tactical first steps? You know, maybe someone that you're just starting to work with, or someone that you're casually in conversation with, and they say, Keith, like, this feels so big, you know, how can I kind of get started? How would you break that down for folks?
Yeah. Well, I think let me say one thing about something you said, and then answer that as part of it. So you used the word identity just a minute ago. And that to me is more important work than any of the other work. So once you get clear on your identity and how you want to show up, that's going to blossom into everything that motivates you and what you're going to do. So the question about what are the steps to take, I would say, is get clear on your identity. Like, get clear on the stories you tell yourself. So I'll give you an example. I told you I have two older brothers, or two brothers. They're both older. So when you grow up, you know, birth order is a thing. So when I grew up and I had two older brothers, I wanted them to hang out with me and play with me. So how did I do that? If they said, Keith, go get me a Coca-Cola, I would run as fast as I could to go get a Coca-Cola. If they were like, hey man, do this, I would go do that. I would do whatever they said, because that's how they would hang out with me. Well, that worked great as a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old. But when you become a leader and you're trying to please everyone and make everyone happy, that's not that effective, right? So to get clear on, I was managing that sales office sometimes as a little brother. I was not conscious of the identity that I had, that was playing out as I led. So I was doing a lot of people pleasing and a lot of effort to make sure everyone was happy, and results would sometimes suffer as a result of that, because I would be slow to make a decision, or I would make sure I checked in with everyone when I could have just been the decision maker. So I would suggest that people start to do two things. One is do the work on guiding principles. I'm happy to give you the 4 steps, or you can pick up the book. It's in the book, but, you know, go through and create core values, group them together, kind of prioritize them, and then write out some guiding principles. And don't go for perfection. Just get something down. You can always modify it and change it. So that's one step. And then the second step is also pay attention to those subconscious identity things that might be inside of you that you aren't aware of. So maybe you've got a little brother syndrome going on, because as soon as somebody made me aware of that, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know I was doing that, but I got data that showed me I was doing that. I was like, oh, okay, well, now I can walk into a meeting and go, I'm the decision maker here, or I'm the one who can make the decisions. I don't have to be the little brother. I can be the strong leader. I can listen, I can get information, and then I can go make a decision. And that changed the way I led based on that identity piece that you said.
That's such a resonant correlation of the roles we play in our identity as a child, and particularly with siblings, or it could be dynamics with parents. I think you probably took, you know, myself and everyone listening right back to childhood of who were they? And, you know, I was the older brother, and like, my brother was running to grab me sodas, and my sister too. And like, they were, and I tried not to take advantage of that too much, but, you know, they wanted to hang out with their older bro. And so it's amazing that you could see that behavior and those roles showing up a lot later in life, and have the self-awareness to realize, hey, is this way of being in this environment fitting here? Wait a minute. No, I'm a leader of this team, and actually this is the identity that I want to bring out. And this type of, this set of roles are going to be more effective in this environment, and more of an authentic representation of who I want to be.
The landscaper went rogue. He's sculpting the bushes again. And a propane guy is a no-show.
We're not going to make it out there today.
Stop managing the managers. Get loyal. We act as the buffer between you and the chaos. We speak contractor so you don't have to. Loyal Home Concierge. We manage the pros.
Right.
And I think that encouragement to folks when they're developing these guiding principles and they're kind of taking the first stab, that it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
And it's not final, and it can be a little messy, and it's open to revision. I think that removes a lot of, the intimidation of having these perfect, chiseled in stone.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm a recovering perfectionist to some extent. And I think a lot of us are. Some people are perfectionists, and it's okay, and some aren't. But one of my favorite words that may have been given to me by another coach is experimentation. Like, just put something down and let's just try it out. Let's see how it goes, right? So if I was with a client yesterday who is suffering from a little bit of imposter syndrome. She says, when I walk into the meeting, I sit there and go, wait, I shouldn't be here. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I said, is that a true statement? Do you know? And she goes, oh no, once the meeting starts, I totally have all the answers. I know my stuff. So she says, it kind of dissipates, but it's still there. Like, every time I answer an email or I do this, I have that. And so we talked about just experimenting. I said, let's experiment with another thought before the meeting. Maybe the thought is, I know my stuff, or I deserve to be here. And just experiment, just play with it and see what happens. If it doesn't work, great, we'll try another experiment. But I think that experimentation takes the pressure off a little bit, that we can say, hey, it might work. Parts of it might work. Some of it might work. Didn't work at all. Okay, no problem. Let's try something else, or let's modify it. And you just kind of, you start shaping it, and eventually you get to this place where you're like, yeah, I deserve to be here. And when you operate from that place, it's so much more powerful in terms of whatever it is you want to create, right? And you show up in a way, and I'm not saying you become an egotistical, maniacal, crazy person. You still can be humble, but you can also say, yeah, I know what I know. I've spent 15 years learning this business. Are there things I don't know? Absolutely, but I'm willing to learn. But I do know what I know, and you have me in this position because of my expertise. So I'm going to share it with you and not be quiet.
Yeah. And the word that I'm feeling as you're describing this is liberating. Like, it's just like, oh, it's a lightning effect.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that guidance to folks. So I want to pivot as we come to a close in our conversation here to a little bit about your community in Austin now. You're such an intentional guy with your family, in the corporate environments you've worked with, in your clients' interactions as you work with these leaders. You've got these cool neighborhood traditions. What are some maybe life-giving friend circles here in Austin now, or friend rhythms that you have?
Yeah, well, I certainly have, I do have all these little bitty pockets. I got the guys that I went to elementary school with. I got my college buddies, my golf group. We have a very tight-knit golf group because you see each other every Friday and Sunday or whatever days you play golf. So that's really fun. But I will say there's a group that I just love that, again, I don't know. I got the idea, I think we started 22 years ago, 23 years ago, wow. Where, there's book clubs and people, women or sometimes men and women get together and they read a book and they talk about it. And at the time, I think I was going to parties. I had young kids. When I'd see you at a party and be like, hey man, what's going on? You'd be like, yeah, how about those horns? And we just talk about the weather and all that surface stuff. And I wanted a community of people that I could talk to something about that was just deeper than that, where we could have real conversations and I could ask real questions like, how do you deal with the fact that your kid's up at 3 a.m. and you haven't slept and you feel like throwing them, across the room or whatever? And I didn't have that. I had some friends, but even their friends, sometimes you just talk at surface level. So we created, I went off and just started talking to some people I knew, and it was really people that I knew professionally and not personally. And I said, let's create this thing called the men's group is what we call it. And the idea was, it was like book club without a book. We would just get together once a month, and we would just sit down and chat. But the idea was to be able to talk about real things. It was a confidential space that we created. We had some rules around, how we talked to each other and how we worked with each other. But all the topics were open, anything. We could talk about anything. We could talk about, we talk about sex. We talk about how we deal with aging parents. We talk about death. We talk about all these different things. And so that group still gets together on a monthly basis. We have dinners 1 month where it's a little more casual, and then we have house meetings is what we call them, where different people in the group host a meeting, and we'll meet from Friday afternoons from 1 to 5. And there's somebody who kind of facilitates or organizes what we're going to talk about. And then we started, I think, 15 years ago, we started having a retreat every January. So we get together for Thursday night to Sunday or Saturday noon. And we design kind of a retreat where everybody's responsible for bringing something. We've played games, we've meditated, we've done intentional walks, we've watched a movie and then talked about it. Just whatever you can imagine, right? And the group has morphed and changed. We've had people move. We had a gentleman pass away, one of our core people, which we miss dearly. But we've integrated new people, and it's not a huge group. I think it's gone from 5 to 10 maybe. And right now I think we have 6.5. A gentleman moved up to Wisconsin, but he still comes back for the retreat every year.
And what an incredible group. My hope is that every human could have a group like that. And I got to benefit from watching my dad be a part of a similar men's group really my entire life. Mm-hmm. And I watched how it made him a better man, a better father, a better husband, a better leader in his business. It was so enriching to his life and to our lives.
Right.
I'm also part of similar groups, and it's one of the highlights of my week when I go and get to be with a group of like-minded, I call them brothers, and we have these different rhythms of connection. And I think if I were to break down for folks the formula of what you're doing, I would say, find a group of people, probably small, that there's a little bit of overlap and, in your words, guiding principles. Create a spirit of transparency so you can be real, talk about real stuff.
Yeah.
Talk about, what you're wrestling with in life, or celebrate wonderful moments of, wins in your life. And then have regularity. Maybe you get together weekly or bi-weekly, and then I think it's powerful to break bread together.
Absolutely.
There's something about having a meal together that really breeds close connection. So I would love to see, everyone in the world finding a group like that. And I just envision how enriching that could be to all communities.
Yeah.
When people get to be known and, connected with like that.
I agree. And I think, it can be tied to a religion or a spirituality piece, or it doesn't have to be. It could be tied to something else, or it doesn't have to be. Like our group, we have lots of different religious backgrounds. We have different sexual orientations. We have different backgrounds. We have different races. We've tried to mix it up, and it can be that, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be, hey, we want a group of people, and here's what we want to talk about. And I would add one word. You said transparency. I would also add confidentiality. Like, make sure that, we're going to talk about stuff, and, I just want to know that it's not going to go beyond this circle, because otherwise I might not bring it up. Like, if I know you're going to run out and tell your girlfriend or your wife or whatever, and then she might call my wife or something like that, and be like, okay, hang on, I can't talk about that. So there's got to be some confidentiality. And I think there also has to be some agreement about, I guess in our world, we call it kind of a combination of judgment and coaching. Like, don't be, if you want to talk about something and I became really judgmental about it, that causes you to maybe go, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't talk about that with Keith. Whereas even if you bring up something controversial, something I disagree with, we're going to have a respectful conversation, right? And you're allowed to have your opinion. I might be allowed to have mine, but we're not going to make it, personal. We're just going to say, look, on certain things, maybe we disagree on this and that's okay, but we're still good friends, etc. But to try to keep the judgmental part, as much as you can to the side. And that, the other thing we kind of integrate is, let's say you say something, I might ask you, we have a couple of coaches in the group. We say, can I coach you? But it basically means, can I ask you some questions? Or can I dig deeper? Can I challenge your thinking? And we're not doing it because we're trying to be jerks. We're doing it in service of your own processing and your development and what you want, right? So sometimes those people have asked me questions and I've been like, oh my gosh, I never thought about that. That's a great question. And it has, it's shifted the way I might view something by just someone who I know cares about me says, Keith, it seems like you might want to consider X. And I'll be like, So it's super powerful.
I really appreciate what you just added there, because that's a powerful formula for forging trust in community.
Right.
And trust enables a lot of the richness that we've been talking about. Keith, this has been such a fantastic time with you. I'm walking away energized and inspired to lead more thoughtfully in my different arenas. So I'm super grateful. Anything you'd like to leave folks with of how they can connect with you or how they can find the book, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I put the book out because I want to help people, and I want us to have better leaders and more effective leaders in this world. And so if I can help anyone do that, tell them to feel free to reach out to me. I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn, Keith Lewis. The book is Sparking Your Inner Leader. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at your favorite bookstore, or at least order it. It might not be on the shelf yet. I think the ebook is going to be coming out in the next week or so. So that'll be available if you want that. And just reach out to me. I don't know if you want to post email addresses and phone numbers, but I'm always happy to chat with people. So reach out to me. If I can help, I want to be of help.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Thank you so much, Keith.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Austin Community Capital. This show is a celebration of the spirit of Austin, Texas, honoring our past, engaging our present, and building our future together. If this conversation sparked something in you, a new idea, a feeling of connection, or just a good laugh, pass it on. Share this episode with a fellow Austinite or a loved one who needs to hear it. Let's keep weaving this fabric of community together. This show is proudly presented by Loyal Home Concierge. At Loyal, we believe that a healthy, thriving city starts within the four walls of your home. We are passionate about supporting overextended executives, the moms and dads who do it all, and the couples who take life by storm. Because we know that when your home life is supported, you are free to support the ones who matter most.
Your kids, your wife.
Whether you need a proactive manager for your home or a creative problem solver for your next big adventure, we are here to help you design a life of intention. LoyalHomeConcierge.com. Let's make life a little more beautiful together. Stay loyal to your community, and we'll see you next time.